Hello, I'm Rob Hopkins and I am the patron of ISWI 2019, which is an enormous honour, and I'm really sorry that I can't be there in person, but I'm sure you're going to have the most extraordinary, delightful few days of debate and discussion and conversation. And really your subject, your topic of transition and tradition is something that you couldn't really be discussing at a more important and a more urgent time. We're now seeing in the UK last week our Parliament declared a climate emergency following the Scottish and the Welsh governments and many local and regional governments who have declared a climate emergency too. And the United Nations tell us that within 12 years from now we need to be halfway down the curve of depleting carbon emissions, declining carbon emissions, and firmly on the way to zero shortly after that. And if we are to do that, we can look at that purely as being a sort of numerical challenge, as being a political challenge, an infrastructure challenge. I think for me, it feels really important to say that if we were to do that, how extraordinary a period of time would that feel to live through? It kind of almost feels unimaginable to us, I think. It's like the Industrial Revolution compressed into 12 years. Or it's like if you were able to have been historically at a time when the suffragettes changed women's rights, or if you had been able to walk across Selma Bridge with Martin Luther King, or been there when he gave his I Have a Dream speech, or, there are moments in history when anything feels possible and where change feels irresistible. And this next 12 years really needs to feel like a time like that. I imagine that if we are able to achieve what needs to be achieved during that period of time, it'll be something that future generations will sing great songs about and tell great stories about and celebrate the guts and the bravery and the imagination of the people now who actually made that happen, people like yourselves. And that will need to come from all perspectives. It'll come from politics, from communities, from business, from education, universities or whatever. There's something about those words, a climate emergency, which for me are really, really exciting. That we can look at them and we can think, oh, that means, we'll have less of this. And, a lot of the time, like the very right-wing media like to present climate change as just being about less. They want to take away this, they want to take away that. Actually, I think it could be a time of more in so many ways. More conversation, more connection, more sense of purpose, more sense of creating something which transforms the future and which transforms history. And so that theme that you're exploring of transition, for me, I would really hope that during the conference it is discussed and celebrated and kind of invoked with that sense of this is an extraordinary moment in history. What an amazing time to be 18 this is now. Where Naomi Klein says there are no non-radical solutions left. So when there are no non-radical solutions left, it means that we can reconsider, we can reimagine, rebuild everything. And that is such a thrilling kind of an opportunity. So I think that first theme that you have of transition is so important. I would urge you to have a look at the experience and the insights from the transition movement, which started here in my town here and is now active in 50 countries around the world, underpinned by this idea that we need to make our economies more local and more resilient, and that it doesn't make sense to be exporting and importing stuff all around the world and all of the fossil fuel impacts of that, when actually we could be building more local, diverse, vibrant, practical, hands-on economies in the places where we live. There's what's it called? Yeah. So Herman Daly, the economist, he used to say that he used to question why it was that the UK exported the same amount of potatoes to Germany as it imported from Germany every year, or why the UK exported the same amount of butter to the Netherlands as it imported from the Netherlands, or exported the same amount of scarves to Canada as it imported from Canada, that sort of stuff. And he said, why don't we just email each other the recipes? So transition is really a movement that says, why don't we just email each other the recipes and build a more abundant, resilient economy in the places where we live? So the other theme of the conference is tradition, and tradition is kind of is something that that can really help transition, or it can really hinder transition. At its worst, I guess it takes its form in Margaret Thatcher's famous words that there is no alternative, which kind of drove a stake through the heart of the national imagination for about 40 years. And what we really need now to be doing, I think, is taking the best things from tradition, the best things from the past, and combining that with what we really need in order for our imaginations to flourish in the next 10, 12, 20 years. So one of the first things that we did here in Totnes when we started doing transition was we did a whole load of oral history interviews with different people. Excuse me, because I was fascinated with the idea of what can we learn now from the people who grew up in a time when they had less energy, a more localized food infrastructure, when there was less consumerism, when people lived more seasonally, more locally. What insights can we get from them? So I spoke to lots of different people, many of whom are no longer with us actually, and asked them about all of that. And at the end of the interviews I said, what are the things that you would be really happy to leave in the past? And what are the things that we've left in the past that you really wish we hadn't? So I just wanted to share those with you. So they said, so there was a fairly high degree of unanimity on the things that were best consigned to the past. They were life without washing machines, coal, life without central heating, cold houses and the resultant feeling of being permanently cold in winter months, and the mangle, which was a device that you turned with two wheels and you put your clothes through and it squeezed all the water, most of the water out of them, and most of it went all over your legs in a cold shed, and it was quite horrible. So the things that actually people felt we should carry forward with them into the future were computers, double glazing, the internet, solar panels, cavity wall insulation and household insulation in general. There's a bit of a theme there. The National Health Service, good public transport, the washing machine, the vacuum cleaner, and the railway network that we used to have. So I think that it's a beautiful theme for you to be exploring, of transition and tradition and these things together. And I'm sure you'll have days of fascinating debate and discussion. I hope that it feels like an event where your imagination is really invited and cherished, and where you feel you have time and space to really come up with ideas. And I would always suggest that you really root those conversations in what are we going to do about it. That it's not just the conversations don't remain just as ideas and as conversations, but that you leave at the end of this conference with changes that you're going to make in your own life, changes that you're going to make in the organisations and institutions you're part of, and changes you can make in the places where you live. Because this is a time when just talking about things isn't really enough anymore. That tiny window of opportunity that we have really needs us all to be the people who step up and decide that the change starts with us now in this place where we are. So I wish you all the best for the most amazing event and the most amazing conference. And I want to just leave you with a quote by Neil Gaiman, who writes books, novels for young adults, which some of you might have read. So he said, "We all, adults and children, have an obligation to daydream. We have an obligation to imagine. It's easy to pretend that nobody can change anything, that we're in a world in which society is huge and the individual is less than nothing, an atom in a wall, a grain of rice in a rice field. But the truth is, individuals change their world over and over. Individuals make the future, and they do it by imagining things can be different." Have a wonderful conference. I'm delighted to be your patron. I look forward to hearing how it goes, and all the best. Thank you.